Howdy! Ho, 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 my good humans. How are thy doing here today in the land of the ramble? Joined by Loon today to talk a little bit about PlayStation, talk about the old state of the play and the lack of games that we're playing on the PlayStation, or at least the lack of games that PlayStation specifically is making on PlayStation. It's been a weird generation, Loon. So how we figured to set this up is since Loon is kind of like the Xbox guy, I'm going to be asking Loon some specific Xbox questions in the next video that we record together about the
Yep.
future of Xbox, just kind of talking shop, catching up. And since I've been a lifelong PlayStation guy, Loon is going to be asking me questions about PlayStation, how I feel about the brand, yada yada yada. Um, so Loon, uh, you're today you're in the interviewer role. How do you feel about the task at hand?
Yeah. So obviously, like you said, it's going to be two separate videos. We're going to be recording them back to back, I believe,
Yes,
if I'm not
sir.
mistaken. And yeah, it's one of them things where it's an extremely strange and weird generation
Yeah.
of where you know I know people like don't be doom and gloom and stuff, and it's like PlayStation is in its weakest state. It's been in a very very long time. These past
Well,
few
how about we
years.
start right there? Is it the worst generation ever? Like, I mean, I feel like
I
it's worth asking that.
I don't know personally. So we're going to obviously go back and forth with our thoughts. This isn't just like kicking it to your team and stuff. For me,
Right.
I don't. It's so difficult because people obviously forget as well. Obviously, with it being so recent, that's fresh in your mind. But then people have forgotten just how bad PS3's opening like few years were.
Right.
Like it was absolute dog. Um, so how many years did it take them to like get Uncharted out and stuff like that?
Uncharted would have been 2007 or 9, I believe. So, no, Uncharted I think was 2009, the first Uncharted, and then 2 was 2011. No, Uncharted 1 was 2007. Uncharted 1 was 2007, I think.
Uncharted
Um,
1 release date. Yeah, November 2007.
okay, so that was close around launch, the year after launch. And it really was from that point with the PlayStation 3 where they really started to pick up steam. It was Uncharted 1 into Uncharted 2 into Infamous 1 into Infamous 2, the Resistance games, Killzone, and then obviously capping off the generation with The Last of Us. And that was, then we would lead into what I believe in terms of first party output was the greatest generation of PlayStation ever with the PS4. It was
Mhm,
just 2, 3 first party bangers a year. Highest possible quality single player games you could get. And I think at that point I was like, I that was my favorite run from any publisher ever, maybe. Like, legitimately, I think in that span between maybe 2000 and let's say 10 to 2020, that might have been my favorite decade that any publisher has ever had with the games that PlayStation was consistently putting out. I was eating so good, and I think that there's a fall off that has to be factored in here where we went from that to what we have now in terms of the first party output. And I understand people saying, like, what are y'all talking about? PlayStation, from a business sense, is having their best generation ever. And that's true. And we can get to all of that, but I don't care about their business. I care about the games I'm playing as a fan of the video games they make. And that's the thing that doesn't get uh, maybe I'm an anomaly. That could be true. But like the big reason I buy the PlayStation system is for the first party output. Like, I think that they just make better games than mostly any other publisher in the world when they're doing what they do best. But then this generation, they stop doing what they do best. And I think the fall off kind of makes me feel personally like it is one of the worst generations in PlayStation history. Um, but Then you also look at the PlayStation 2 era, which I know once again, such a weird thing to even say, weird to even utter that the PS2 generation could have been one of the worst generations ever. But if we're talking about from a first party output standpoint, the PS5 and PS2 are very similar, where they just straight up relied on third party relationships, getting exclusive games from their second and third party partners, having games like Grand Theft Auto that launched exclusively on their system for a period of time. Like, the that was kind of the game changer for the PS2 in the same way that a Black Myth Wukong, and the same way that a Baldur's Gate 3, and the same way that a Silent Hill 2, a Final Fantasy 7, a you know what I mean? Like, so it's I'm feeling a lot of PS2 energy with the PS5, but we also at that point we didn't have these expectations of what like from PS1 to PS2, it wasn't like we had the dip that we had from PS4 to PS5, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a fair assessment. Um, it could be a culmination of like many things. I think obviously the biggest thing in the room is always drawn back to the live service. Them focusing on that. That's
Yeah.
a big down thing. I think the industry as a whole is also in a transitionary period across the board of like not knowing how the hell to balance like budgets have ballooned absurdly because I don't
Yeah.
like as an example like the Wonder Woman game that's been in development. They basically scrapped and started over again, and they turn around again. Yeah,
Yeah.
we pumped like 150 mil into that, and it's like that's some games don't get that as like an entire development budget and marketing budget as a whole, and
Most don't.
you're willing to like can that and just start from like that's crazy. Like there's something that needs to change. Um, so I think that's also a big struggle for them. Them going so hard into the very narrative driven, rich experiences. I think
Mhm.
it's bitten them a little bit now as well. Having so many of them because they're so expensive to make now.
Yep.
Because you're constantly having to be like, okay, push graphics, push this, push that. Because that was like one of the big reasons that what you used to see is something like, say, the Order 1886, that still holds up visually today.
Mhm.
But what would always happen is that the reason that they were able to get that kind of compacted in is because it was so short.
Right.
You'd only have to make the game 6 hours long and make it look visually stunning. Same like Rise, Son of Rome, and stuff like that for the Xbox. They've kind of graphics haven't really like popped off big time. So they're still expensive to make what they do, and yet they've made games like 4 times, 5 times the size. Like, it's crazy. So it's just budgets have ballooned.
Well, and also, we look at Uncharted 1, that was like a 7-hour game, 6-hour game. Uncharted 2 was like 8 hours. Uncharted 3 was like 12 hours. Uncharted 4 was like 16 to 20 hours. The Last of Us 1 was 14 hours. The Last of Us 2 was 30 hours. So it's like, why did that happen? Why don't we go but also consumer expectations shifted massively. Where and I don't know why that happened either, where players were like, "We wanna pay the same amount of money for double the game," which I get from like, I get it, of course. You telling me I can get 4 slices of meat on my burger opposed to 2 for the same price? Like, sure. But at the end of the day, 4 patties on a burger sometimes is just too much.
Mm,
Sometimes the 2 just taste better. And, like, playing The Last of Us 1 for 14 hours, sure, TLOU 2 is double the length, but the it just tastes better, The Last of Us 1. It was paced better. Like, by the end of it, you're still wanting a little bit more, but it ends, like, perfectly where you are wanting a little bit more. You're not burned out. And then so we got into that Assassin's Creedification with PlayStation to some degree where it's like, bigger isn't always better. You know what I mean? More isn't always necessary. You look at RGG, the masters of iteration, the masters of reusing assets, the masters of getting games out on a and I listen, say what you will about the dude. I was listening to an interview with Bobby Kotick. He
mhm.
did like a 2-hour interview. And say what you like, the dude, by all accounts, probably wasn't a great human being. I don't know, I wasn't in the damn Activision household. I have no idea the goings on in inner Activision, but by all accounts, probably not the best working environment under Bobby Kotick. But I was listening to an interview with him and he made a really damn good point. He said when he ended up selling Activision, he got scared because he was looking over at China and looking over at Tencent and looking over at these different conglomerates and being like, these guys are working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. The culture is totally different over there with the expectations of how much people work. They're in office. They
Mhm.
are they are grinding and they're able to, straight up rip a lot of, you know, uh, already pre-built concepts and kind of like you look at what Tencent's doing with that Horizon copy paste. That's crazy, man. And he's like, they're allowed to do that. And they are, and he was also saying, like, and not just the copy paste shit. He was like, there's a lot of creativity going on in China that people are undervaluing, that people aren't recognizing right now. He's like, China is going to be a force in this industry. And he was like, I'm just scared that we aren't going to be able to compete at some point. And like, I, that's a and you look at PlayStation starting to invest more and more in China, the China Hero project, and starting to look at like a Black Myth Wukong and look at, this isn't China, but they went and tried to acquire the exclusive rights to Crimson Desert, Korean developed game. And
Yeah.
now they have that Tides of Annihilation developed in China. I don't know if they're getting that exclusive, but they're partnering with them. They're trying to make the HoYoverse stuff. They're
Mhm.
trying to do a lot of these deals in China because it seems like that is where the market is moving massively for like the next growth venture. And the productivity there is just off the charts. So I don't know. I found that really, really fascinating where it's like a lot of this honestly might just be due to crunch culture not being accepted anymore, where games can't come out as quick as they used to because developers aren't sleeping under their desk anymore, which is great. Like that's we should be in favor of that.
Yeah, so it's a combination of that and the trimming constantly because you've
Right.
gone from gaming being niche. So these companies made games because they wanted to make games. And then when these big publishers scooped things up and then become publicly traded companies, and the thing that they focused on more was instead of, you know, they don't care about ratings. Look at what Black Myth Wukong ended up getting on like PlayStation 5 in the end. Like it wasn't a high rating, but that somehow made it to like the game of the year noms, sold millions and millions of copies. All they care about is profit margins. And that's all that they trim the staff down more and more and more. There's no crunch culture because that's not accepted. So how they you can't keep up. You can't keep up
Yeah.
with that output because you need more people now more than ever to make a game actually of high quality. And what they're
Yeah.
trying to do is trim, 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 and then just hope that AI fills that hole. You have Ubisoft sitting there turning around going, "Yeah, we're exploring AI so that it can write the story of like side quests and stuff." And it's like, dude, you guys don't even write good side quests with like your human. What a
As
robot isn't going to
is.
make that any better. Like,
Right.
Christ Almighty. So it's just a massive struggle from head to toe.
Yeah. Yeah, I so overall to put a cap on this first, is this the worst generation of PlayStation ever? I would say from a business standpoint, obviously not. It's probably the best.
Mhm.
But from a consumer standpoint, for me personally, yeah, I definitely feel like it is, if not the worst, I mean, it's the worst from a consumer standpoint, without a doubt. I mean, there's never been a fumble like the live service fumble in the history of PlayStation. I don't think. Even the PS3, the launch of the PS3, I don't think that was as catastrophic as making the single biggest that Concord was the biggest failure in the history of video games. $400 million for a game that was on the market for less than, like, 2 months. I mean, that's never happened before. Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, no, you think of, like, the things that dominated the news space when they were, like, the laughing stocks, like Kingdoms of Amalur almost sinking the state of Rhode Island and stuff like that, and I think that was only for, like, 100,000,000.
Right.
Um, yeah, no, it's not good. It's it's the thing though of weirdly, like, you feel uncomfortable saying it's the worst generation though, to fully lock that in as, like, a definitive
'Cause
answer
it's not
because
over.
it's not for one, it's not over, for two, obviously, they're making shitloads of money,
Mhm.
and the difference is that the reason we feel this way is because of that drop off in output.
Yeah.
They've still put out crazy games that are only available on PlayStation that aren't on Xbox, as an example. That's still really
But they're
like
not
Stellar
their
Blade and
games.
stuff. No,
Yep.
but this is the thing of like you can't really say like the PS2 generation sucked overall
Right,
because it was all
right.
third party deals as well, much
Yep.
like this, and that's why it was a good thing to draw the comparison of that. A lot of the good heavy hitters of PS2 were third party because that's what carried that generation for both sides, really.
Yeah, I think it's if you're a fan of Insomniac, if you're a fan of Gorilla, if you're a fan of Naughty Dog, if you're a fan of Bluepoint, if you're a fan of Sony Bend, if you're a fan of these teams, Sony London, if you're a fan of these teams that either got completely axed, got their game canceled, were forced to be put on live service projects, are wasting time doing that, and that's why we're not going to get a Horizon 3 until PS6. That's why we're not going to get a new Naughty Dog game until 2029. That's why we're not going to get, that's why probably we're not getting Venom opposed to we were probably supposed to get Venom in this period between Wolverine and Spider-Man 2. That's why we're not going to get that. Why we're not going to get a new Blue Point IP is because they were off working on a God of War live service game. The reason you're not going to get a Bloodborne 60 frames per second patch or there's all of the opportunity cost. The reason we're not getting a return to Siphon Filters because Ben was put on a live service game instead of a return to Siphon Filter or a new, an Alpha Protocol spy style game or whatever the hell they could be doing. That's the thing is these developers could be doing any number of different things, but they were forced into the live service sweatshop. And that I think from a consumer standpoint, as somebody who loves PlayStation first party, PlayStation studio games, I would say, yeah, it has to be the worst generation of all time for PlayStation so far. Could they turn it around? No. But not
Well,
from that stream. It's just it takes too long to make games.
I guess this kind of links in then with my we're going to be jumping up and down this list, I suppose, and not doing
Totally
it
fine.
like from one to whatever it was. Because you're saying obviously the lack of games.
Mhm.
Do you think the question that I had was, do you think that due to the lack of titles this generation, users will be reluctant to upgrade their system? As the thing I draw like as a comparison to that is you had some people who were really, really hot with the idea of that PS5 Pro, but it was also met with such coldness at the same time. And I don't
Yep.
think that was primarily Xbox fanboys dominating, the talk space. There was a lot of PlayStation and Sony fans that were like, "Yeah, I'm not upgrading. What reason do I have to like? I've only just got this and stuff like that." And on top of that, you've not really shown many games that are going to be like fully utilizing that compared to like
Yep.
if a PS5 can run it like 80% essentially, and you can't really tell the difference. Why are you going to dump what $700, $600 on it?
Right. Well, hell, a lot of games are running better on base PS5 than PS5 Pro.
Yeah, Silent
It's
Hill
like that's
2,
so
right?
crazy.
Remake at
Yeah.
day one with that was tragic.
So are you asking me what do I think players will be hesitant to upgrade to PS6 or are you asking me do I think players are hesitant to upgrade to PS5 Pro? Because if you're asking that then it's like I would say definitely yeah. I don't
No,
think that
for the
many.
for the PS6, do you think that if the hypothetically, if they continue with the first party output rate that they've done this generation and that somehow carries on into PS6 and we're at the same like how many like first party titles have they put out since PS5?
Right.
Like less than a
So
handful, right? Of like heavy, heavy, heavy hitters.
yeah, Ratchet, Returnal, God of War, Horizon, Spider-Man 2. Astro, so 6 that I can think of off the top of my head. There's probably a few others, but not yeah, not a boatload for sure.
Mm,
Um, so you're asking would they okay, so here's my assumption. Would players be willing to upgrade to the PS6? This is this generation gonna have a detrimental effect on the next generation?
yep,
I would say undoubtedly for the enthusiast market, the people who are in the know, the people like you and I think PlayStation has kind of gotten to a weird spot where they're just looked at as video games in the same way that Nintendo is. You know, where it's like when you think of video games, you just think of Nintendo and PlayStation. When you think of cell phones, you just think of iPhone. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird spot to be in where they're just so uncontested. They're shooting wide open jump shots and they're still missing, but they're still wide open. So it's like there's not a lot of defense being played. There's not a lot of places you can go and play these other games if you want a home console experience that are making valuable enough, cases for you to switch from a PlayStation to an Xbox, for example. Um, Now if we wanna get into the conversation of which we'll probably talk more about that in the Xbox video, but, like, if an Xbox comes out next generation and is like, yeah, Gears of War EDA and Perfect Dark and Clockwork Revolution are all exclusive, and so is the new Fable, and so is a new RPG that we're developing, and so is Skyrim 2, or so is Elder Scrolls 6, or, then we're like, "Oh, shit. Elder Scrolls 6 is only available on Xbox? Okay." Um, yeah. People are gonna be making the switch. But as it stands now, it's like, I I don't where else would they go to PC? I
mm,
sure, some people will. There is definitely and that you definitely need to be thinking, for sure, PlayStation, you need to be thinking about that. If the rumors are to be believed that Steam is going to release a home console device, hey, dipshit, all your games are on Steam. So that's no competition? You can play all Xbox and all PlayStation games on this new Steam console?
handle
What do you
PC.
and all your PC stuff. Are you just gonna quit releasing games on Steam now after you've already rolled this program out and bought Nixxes and bought all these other porting studios? You're just gonna stop. Huh. Don't think that's too smart. Maybe you shoulda never did this in the first place,
This was
you
my
know?
that was my stance of people being like, with Xbox throwing everything everywhere. Because it's also with you bringing up the PC thing. That's what I was going to say. Is how can Sony keep their player base from jumping to PC now that it looks like you're talking like 90% of their titles will be moved over there.
Yeah.
They're slow. Don't get me wrong. They are doing it strategically. They're not just like Xbox putting it out day and date because they know that they still have some pull. But a lot of the time they're going over them. They're throwing Spider-Man. They're throwing like you wouldn't have fathomed that in the PS4 generation that you'd have that many titles on PC, or even any title at the beginning of PS4. You wouldn't have even
Right.
fathomed that would be like, no, there's no way in ever that a Sony title will be put on PC. They belong on PlayStation, but the market has changed. So, is there anything that they could do to combat that? Because there are going to be people that, when they're looking at the PS5 Pro's price, it's probably going to be fairly in line with that PS6 when it comes out, and they're
Totally.
thinking, well, what's the point of, like you said, if games is all that people care about, and Steam does put that console out, that completely eliminates the argument of, well, I don't want to get a PC because they're too cumbersome. I
Yep.
don't want to do this because it's too much work and tinkering. Like the reason that the Steam, what was it, the Steam machine or whatever it was, the
Yeah.
original console thing that came out, it was because it was way too much like a PC. They also
Yep.
didn't have the Xbox and the PS4 titles on there to draw people in. But if you're talking like if they somehow crack it and knock it completely out of the park, they could end up cannibalizing like the console market entirely. 'Cause if that thing does like
Totally.
VR as well, like if you're talking like you can play Half-Life Alex on that, You can play all PlayStation things that are on that, you can play all Xbox things on that. If you're able to run emulation on that,
That's what I was about to say, you'll be able to emulate anything.
like, what what is the point of other than just being loyal to a brand? That would just
Yeah.
be the best place as long as it runs and functions.
You know how to combat that? Stop fucking putting your games over there. Like, stop. It's do it now before it's too late. I mean, it I know I'm an old dinosaur in this belief, but, like, I am a firm that's a hill I'll die on, is the exclusive hill. I don't and you know what? I'll go ahead and listen. Exclusives don't make you money from the software. They make you money from the hardware. And I know that's such a like people are like, well, the hardware doesn't make any money. Bear with me. You release God of War, The Last of Us, Horizon, Spider-Man, Final Fantasy, so forth and so on. And over time, what maybe 30, 40, 50 million people buy your console for those that unit of games, all combined. On and on with the different exclusives. Those games have a beginning, middle, and an end. What do those players do after they finish Final Fantasy, God of War, Horizon, etc.? They hop into a Fortnite. They hop into a Call of Duty. They hop into a GTA 5 and they spend boatloads of money. Fortnite generated $7 billion in revenue last year, or I think it might have been the year before last. 7 billion. PlayStation is the number one place that Fortnite is played. Let's say that on PlayStation, 3 billion. A very conservative estimate. Let's say 3 billion was generated on PlayStation. PlayStation gets 30% of that.
Mhm.
They didn't lift a finger. But why was the $3 billion spent in PlayStation's ecosystem opposed to an Xbox, opposed to whatever? It that's why exclusives matter, in my opinion. Exclusives get people into your system, and sure, they're not gonna make you all the money, but they get people in, and that's why you're looking at a PlayStation 5 generation where it's the most profitable generation they've ever had. It's more profitable than multiple generations combined that
Mm.
PlayStation has had in the past. That has nothing to do with The Last of Us. That has nothing to do with God of War, Horizon. That's because or that has nothing to do with those games in terms of their individual profit margins. That
Right.
has to do with those games getting you into that ecosystem, and then from that point on, you're spending 20, 30, $40 a month on different service games. And so like that's why exclusives matter. You know what I mean? And if Steam has most of those service games and then they also have most of your exclusives, well, hey, that 30% cut that you took of $3 billion, why wouldn't those players just go to Steam if they can have access to a GTA 5 as well as God of War, The Last of Us, Horizon, if Steam is actually gonna make a home console box,
Yeah. Obviously, I'm playing devil's advocate here and try and like argue both
right?
sides to keep it interesting. The only thing that gives me pause when you think about it like that, you think of they did the Steam Deck, and it didn't really rival the Switch. It's better
No.
in every way than the Switch. Performance, other than it being lacking, but even then, if you're smart enough and don't care about the legal ramifications of it, you can play Switch games on that. Really, you can just crack them. That's
Yeah,
so
but there's a
these things
barrier of
exist.
entry.
Yeah, but and then there's all of them PlayStation and stuff. So clearly, that's what I mean. There's sometimes the lines can get blurred. Sometimes people just are also just reluctant to move ecosystems. Maybe they're weighed down by that library that they already have, and they don't care. If that also makes sense, because I'm using it as an example for me. Like the reason why I sold the PlayStation. They have games I wanna play, but I also have a finite amount of time. I can't divert that between 2 systems, and I've spent so much on one system, why basically throw that away when I can just the one that I've spent, like, under, like, 200 instead of thousands and thousands, like, it's just not that's not feasible for me. It just
Yeah.
makes no sense.
The It's a compelling argument, and I mean, we are kind of at the beginning stages of, like, that digital library being built.
Mm,
I Maybe I'm an outlier, I don't really know, I can only speak from my perspective, but, like, I would jump into a Steam console like I jumped into an Xbox this generation. I'm not an Xbox guy, but when you buy Obsidian, I instantly become an Xbox guy. When you buy Bethesda, I instantly become an Xbox guy. When you tell me when you do a press conference and Phil Spencer sits down and says, "We bought Bethesda to make exclusive games for Xbox," then yeah, I buy an Xbox because I wanna play those games. You know what I mean? And so, like, but maybe I'm the outlier in that. Um, and if you're telling me that the games that were previously exclusive to PlayStation or Xbox can now be played on a Steam machine or whatever the hell they're gonna call it a year later, it just the thing about Nintendo is, like, when you're competing with them in the handheld market, you're competing with their software,
mhm.
and there's just no competition. Like, they make the best software in that space, you know what I mean? Like, people buy Nintendo for Mario, Zelda, all of that. If you're telling me I could buy a Steam machine and they're competing in the console market space, and they have all the other games that are in the console market space, like, it just becomes almost undeniable. You know what I mean? Like, I would think PlayStation would have to, right now, be looking at that and go, "Dude, if y'all are actually going to make a home console, we cannot you cannot have our games on that thing. You can have our games on the PC, functionality, but not on the actual console," which I doubt they'd be able to do that. Steam be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? It's all the same."
Yeah, because it's kind of what I think I alluded to this before of, like, maybe this is Xbox's strategy. Sprinkle the little seeds onto PlayStation, like, give them Forza Horizon 5 and stuff, and put all of these titles as thingy, and then yank them next gen. That's the only thing that really makes sense to me if you're gonna be very aggressive. If you're starting to build momentum, it doesn't make sense to keep feeding that momentum into your competitor. If they really don't move the needle whatsoever, then they don't have a choice. They have to just keep doing it, unfortunately. It's just not something that they'll be able to dig themselves out of. But if, like, say, Indiana Jones does really, 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 really well on PlayStation and stuff, and you end up building up all this, like, here's quality, 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 you then hold tons of cards out of your hand where you can be like, okay, we don't have an obligation to put these on PlayStation. We're choosing to put them on there. We can just take that back next generation. And then you have
Right.
that kind of like drug addict fix of, oh man, I want to play all these games and they've been moved. Because that was like what pissed people off when Starfield was first announced to be only on Xbox. But that's only one title. If you have
Yeah.
suddenly 10 titles that people are really anticipating, that's a lot more pulling power than just because people are like, "Ah, I don't really care about Starfield but that much to buy an entire Xbox over it."
Yeah.
It's not enough for one piece of software. You need to
No.
have a bunch of things. That's the only thing I can envision as to if they're gonna be aggressive with that strategy.
Yeah. I think that if I think it's all gonna depend on the launch of their next system. If they launch it and it does gangbusters, I think we will see exclusives for Xbox.
Mm.
If it launches and it's still as awful as the console sales for the Series X, I think they'll just be a third party publisher. Um, which is a bummer to me, but hey, it is what it is. But yeah, I don't in terms of people upgrading to the PlayStation 6, I don't think people are going to be as willing to do so. I of course, whenever you have a Last of Us 3 and a Horizon 3 and a Spider-Man 4 and a X-Men game, and those are all exclusive to PS6, as long as they're not coming to a Steam machine, then yeah, of course people are gonna jump in. But right now, I'm a little bit reluctant to just outright assume that we're gonna see this carryover of success from PS5 to PS6.
Okay. I guess we'll steer into like a completely different avenue.
Yeah.
Um, so another thing, obviously, subscription services. They're kind of the hot thing. Um, Xbox, has Game Pass. PlayStation have all their weird tiers and stuff. And the reason I wrote this down is because I think they recently announced that they're no longer adding PS4 games to whatever their PS Plus is moving forward. They've been cut from the servers. They're not going to be adding
From the
any.
lowest one.
Yeah. Um, so do you think they need to spice up the service, add a bit more like oomph, or are they just gonna? Because this is the thing: when Xbox abandoned games with gold, it wasn't there wasn't really a feeling like they upgraded anywhere else. It was just a cutting of an old thing, and they just continued moving forward. They didn't really innovate Game Pass and stuff. They ended up just making what PlayStation have with the multiple tiers. Is this just going to be something where you just have to wait now for PS6 to come out, and then the PS5 games will be added, and then when PS6 gets late, is that just the cycle continuing, kind of thing?
I so do they need to spice up their subscription service? Overall, I would just say probably not. Just as like an overall blanket statement, I think that the proof is in the pudding at this point. I mean, it's undeniable at this point. Subscription services aren't the way of the future for gaming. Um, you can't put Call of Duty in a subscription service and have next to no growth and think that this is the future of what gaming is. The future of what gaming is what gaming is now. You know what I mean? Releasing good, big, high quality shit, indie shit. The gaming is what the future of gaming is whatever the hell the developers are creating and selling. I think the future of gaming is what the past of gaming is. I think the future of gaming is what the current gaming landscape is. I think people are just going to continue selling games. I don't think subscription services are going to ever become a viable entity in this space. Or viable isn't the right word. They're probably viable as is, but I don't think they're going to become it's not going to be a takeover thing like how Netflix took over Hollywood and movie and then the box office started plummeting. People stopped going to the movie theaters. If we're going to equate movie theaters to people going and buying actual games, there's not going to be that correlation ever for subscription services. I don't think so. I think what they have going for their subscription service is just like pay it as little mind as possible and keep it running, keep it decent enough, and keep it around for sure. I think
Mhm.
the thing that they should do for the easy like optical PR win, and not easy, but the optical PR win is to make PlayStation 3 games downloadable. And then it's like you're off to the races. You
Yep.
don't need to do anything else. Now, never ever put your games over there day one. Ever. Don't ever do that. Go out and grab indie stuff day one for sure. Like they're doing with Lost Records, like they did with Stray, like they did with the Plucky Squire last year. Keep doing that. Keep making those little wins. Never put your stuff over there day one. People are still going out and buying Spider-Man 2 by the tens of millions and then God of War by the tens of millions. You never need to do that. Yeah, that was an awful idea from the start with Xbox, but it's a it, that's it's an awful idea for anybody else to adopt that. For Xbox to do it, it was kind of brilliant in
It's
a way
helped
where
them
it's
out
like,
immensely because they're not market leaders.
yep,
This is why
exactly.
what also needs to be keep in mind is obviously different strategies for different companies. Something that works for Sony isn't going to work for Microsoft. something that works for Microsoft isn't gonna work for Sony, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, when you have 75 million people that buy your console, that's an install base that you can sell games to. When you have 30 million people who buy your console, that's an install base that you can, sell Game Pass to, and then
Mhm.
keep them coming back $25 a month, whatever. Um, and then yeah, so selling games exclusively on an Xbox to just 30 million people isn't as it's not gonna be as lucrative, of course, when you have half the install base. And then that's also why they're pivoting to selling everything everywhere, because then you get all the install base. But I understand that to some degree. From a business standpoint, I understand that for sure. But in terms of what PlayStation should do with their subscription service, I just think as little as possible to keep it going. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like, don't ruin it.
Mhm.
And try to improve it, of course. If you can get
Yep.
PS3 games downloadable, definitely do that, but just keep it running, keep it functional. Try not to increase the price. I think that should be another big goal. Maybe
That's
if
the
you
worry,
do.
isn't it? That's when if
Yeah,
they're ramping and ramping and ramping, then you have to do something. You have to justify that price increase.
yeah.
So,
And maybe PS3 emulation would be the point to jump the price increase just a little bit and then kinda keep it locked in from there with some small increases for inflation.
yep. It's kind of perfectly links in as well with you mentioning the PS3. Should the next PlayStation offer built-in PS3 backwards compatibility?
Whew.
And even because you gotta think, like, the standard's been set, and they really are reluctant to they always say, "Oh, yeah, well, the chips, it's hard to develop for, and it's always this and always that and everything." It's like, look, man, you have, like, tons of you can figure it out. It's not impossible. It'd be arduous to do, but it's not something that isn't able to be figured out. Do you think that they would ever want to do that, or do you think it's just they're happy with relying on whenever a company turns around and goes, "Yeah, here's another HD," like the Master Collection for Metal Gear. They don't really care about handling that stuff themselves because someone else will do it.
Yeah, I think that the move should probably be, if we're talking purely business, should be to make a remastered trilogy or, do a Resistance bundle, release it for $60, sell it as like a standalone thing for a couple years, and then put it into PlayStation Plus. I think what I want, of course, is just to be able to go in and download PS3 games. From a business standpoint, you can make money off of Resistance ports. You can make money off of Infamous ports. You can make money off of Sly Cooper ports, you know, um, which, Sly Cooper's PS2, but still, like you could port those games into a bundle, charge $60, make the money, and then put it into PlayStation Plus a few years later. I think that's probably from a business standpoint what I would look to do. From a consumer standpoint, of course, just being able to go into your PlayStation Plus service and download them would be the move. Um, Backwards compatibility, I think that backwards compatibility is just an interesting it's that thing that we look at as like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You know what I mean? Where it's like that's the dream. That's the best console experience you can have. Where everything that you've ever bought for this system runs on the latest system, and you don't have to have all the other ones hooked up, and it's like, that's the base PS3 is my favorite system of all time for that reason.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like we just talked about, you can argue the launch of the PS3 is one of the worst launches for any console ever, almost killed PlayStation, but that base console running my PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games it's a dream. It's an absolute dream. Um, which I actually just started having issues with that console that I'm gonna have to get fixed or buy a new one, which is a bummer. But
No.
but that's the crazy thing, Loons. In 2025, I'll spend $500 to buy a fat PS3 because I value it that much just to be able to play my PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 games right there on that system. Um,
Because it is important. This is the thing, and, like, what you gotta think about as well is that I know you was talking about, like, from a business perspective, it makes sense to do the ports and stuff. You can do both, and it's been shown that you can do both, because they're gonna be reselling Days Gone. That's probably gonna sell like hotcakes.
Mhm.
You've done the Spider-Man thing where you double dipped with The Last of Us, you've double dipped with Horizon and stuff. Like people will happily buy these twice. So if they've already
Mhm.
bought them and you backwards compat it, and it's happened with even on over on Xbox's side because of where PlayStation didn't have a backwards compatibility thing, where they go and re-release like the Ezio collection. They
Mhm.
sold gangbusters, even though everybody on Xbox had the option, and a lot of people had them games for free because you've thrown them at us with games of gold, but we still went out and bought them again. So that's why it gives me like, I really wish they would adopt like a PS3 like full backwards compatibility thing as much as they can, and screw it, like go for the jugular, go for PS2, PS1. Like once you've cracked it and you've put a team to it, like that software's built, and you just need to kind of tinker that moving forward. It's just getting
Oh,
over that first hurdle that they just don't
they
want to do.
yeah, they could definitely do it, no doubt. I mean, you could have a hardware team come I mean, they had it with the PlayStation 3. You could I mean, we're in the situation now with, like, detachable disk drives and shit where I listen, I'm not a hardware specialist, I don't really understand the
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
yeah, where you have a specific one, like, you buy
Mm.
different ones for the different systems, a PlayStation 1 reader, a PlayStation 2 reader, a PlayStation 3 reader for
That
the
would be
detachable
perfect
disk drives.
for their business thing because they would be able to turn. You could even be scummy about it, because a lot of the time when you're buying hardware upgrades and stuff, they turn around and go, "Well, you're making a like a loss on it." But you just turned around and said you would happily pay 500 for a fucking fixing of a PS3.
Mhm.
So for the die-hard people, they could turn around and go, "Look, man, this is like we figured it out, and only you can have this on PlayStation. 250, 300 each for each gen,"
Yeah.
and people would buy that.
I'd buy all of them. Yeah. I mean, it's if hold up, here's the only caveat, if I could screen record, if I could capture footage on my PlayStation 5 of those PS1, 2, and 3 games, so I could share them here on the that's the one thing that bums me out. I'll be
Yeah,
going
that's
and
so
playing
weird.
PlayStation. Yeah.
Like the
I'll
Vita
be pl
blocks HDMI capturing
yeah.
software, and it's just like, why?
Yeah, it's such a bummer. I've been playing a lot of PS3 games. It's like, well, fuck. I'm not even really talking about them because I don't, which is fine. You can you should be able to play games and not specifically only do it for content's sake, which is a problem for me. But yeah, man, you would obviously it's the same market that is in for the PlayStation 5 Pro. It would be a larger market than that, of course, but it would it would be that same enthusiast, ultra enthusiast market. It's not gonna be the bulk of your market. It's not gonna be the bulk of your players are just gonna buy a base PS6 for $600, $700. But there will be an enthusiast market who will spend $1,000 for full backwards compatibility. Um, yeah, they and if you can go and make some money off of it, sure.
Fair enough. Um, we kind of talked about porting, right? The
Mhm.
the stuff, so we can kind of skip that.
Yeah.
Um, we kind of covered that. Um, all right, they're all kind of closing off on. So this is kind of still in that generation thing. So
Okay.
they clearly can't abandon live service entirely. That's just
Mhm.
not. They can't ignore it completely. As much as we hate it, it's one of them things where if it works, it's the biggest money hat that they
Totally.
can get. So, you know, do they do it themselves or do they rely on third party publishers? And then you sign an exclusivity thing is what I'm getting at. Do you risk footing the bill like you do with a Concord and you get so deep in it and then that bites you big time in the face? Or would it just make more sense to be like, even if it's not like fully exclusive, even just grabbing chunks of the game exclusively for periods of time, like they've done with Call of Duty and stuff. That's why people jumped ship big time as well in the PS4 the casual audience at least. 'Cause you're talking about people buying stuff for Last of Us and stuff. The big casual guys jumped because FIFA used to be exclusive stuff with Xbox, the Legend stuff, and then they lost that. It went everywhere. And Call of Duty used to launch its map packs a month early, and then they lost that. And then it went to PlayStation and stuff. So Does it make sense to maybe shrink their internal stuff if they're gonna do it themselves and do it on a smaller scale? Or do you throw that money at a third party? What do you think?
No, I think a little bit of both. I think that the whole like 12 live service games philosophy, I don't think that was a bad idea at all. You know, I know people were like 12. I The 12 wasn't the problem. The fact that the 12 was you were talking about Bluepoint as one of the 12. You were talking about Sony Bend as one of the 12. You were talking about Naughty Dog as one of the 12. You were talking about Insomniac as one of the 12. You were talking about Gorilla as one of the 12. That was the problem. Teams that have expertise in single player narrative rich experiences were now put on the live service grind. That was the problem. The 12 is just, it's like we get 1,000 live service games a year. The fuck is 12 more? But like you said, go and contract those things out. Like take the budget of Concord, $400 million, and split that between 12 different smaller developers and say, hey, here's the deal, guys. If you create something that becomes a hit, we will put so much money in your fucking pockets. We'll have all of these royalty things already drew up for you. We'll have all of these future plans if it hits this certain concurrent player mark or this certain whatever, that you will be laughing to the bank. You will be able to support this game forever if it hits these milestones. And if not, cool, we'll just pay you for the development for the next, you know, 48 months while you work on it, whatever it ends up being. Yeah, 48 months might, yeah, 48 months probably, something like that, to get one of those things out the door. Um, and so like to me, it would be a situation where you split 400 million between 12 teams and the cream rises to the top. Whichever of these games ends up becoming the hit, you try to buy that studio. Or just continue to support it. You know what I mean? But have it as like a second party ongoing relationship signed into the contract that these are the terms you're going to have to continue working with us for X amount of years, however you want to line it up legally. But like, and for me personally, just once again from a business standpoint, I would launch those games, and if we see like, oh shit, this is, we got 2 million sales on this thing, or if you put it on Steam day one or you put it on PC day one, which a lot of the live service games are, if it peaks at 45,000 concurrent players, it's like, oh shit, this is, even if it drops off at that point, it's like, oh shit, that team has something. 45,000 people at one time were playing their game. We need to buy them. Let's buy them at the low before they balloon up and become a Helldivers 2 success. Because now if you go and buy Arrowhead, imagine you bought Arrowhead if you bought them when they first launched Helldivers 2 opposed to now, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars difference, I would assume. Like, I would assume you could have probably bought them for $200 million dollars or less before the launch of Helldivers 2. And now, I mean, well, 500 million plus, something like that. Like,
Yeah, because they've established their pedigree now. They've
yeah.
shown that they can make something successful, and not only that, it's dominated the market for quite a long time in doing what it does.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, they bought Bungie for 3 point something billion. It's like Arrowhead's had
one
more
of the
success,
worst acquisitions in gaming. Like,
yeah, ever.
I don't know what on earth that like who signed off on that, because that wasn't even like when you bought them at like their peak either. Like they were spiraling by that point. I think I don't know if that was the big thing in their mind was get us a live service studio. Maybe they can direct other live service studios when they were doing that 12 things. Maybe they could be like the head of all of them, so they can basically teach the framework to everybody else. But it's clearly just not worked. Um,
Well, a crazy thing to think about is that 400 million that they spent on Concord, they could split that between 40 teams, 10 million apiece. Whichever of these 40 teams, make a damn reality show out of it. You know what I mean?
the problem is with that though is obviously then That's like indie level quality and stuff. And don't get me wrong, they're good and they move things, but they don't appeal to because you're talking like, all right, that's Salt and Sanctuary levels of
Fall
stuff.
Guys. What about
Yeah,
Fall Guys?
yeah, but that was everywhere. That's the difference, isn't it?
Well, this will be on Steam. They all their live service stuff is usually day and date on PC.
Okay.
Hell, put it
'Cause
on
that's
Switch. A lot
'cause
of
that's
these
what I'm
smaller
worried. I
games.
think you'd need a little bit more budget than 10. Um, but I get what you're talking. Like, don't dump 400 into one. You
Yeah.
can easily stretch that between multiple teams. Um, so
Yeah, I mean, even Fortnite. If I'm not mistaken, I think Fortnite, when it launched in 2017, I think had a $32 million budget.
mhm.
Fortnite. Like, that's insane, dude. You know what I mean? I don't think you can put hundreds of millions of dollars into live service games right now. You need to slow it down, trim it up, and then if it becomes a hit, then, oh, fuck yeah. Pour hundreds of millions of dollars into it.
Yeah, the closest new example of somebody entering the space is obviously Marvel Rivals. I don't know how much
Mhm.
that cost and stuff, but that's still doing well.
Yeah. I'd assume that was up there, but that's also, you're talking about pretty much copy pasting Overwatch with Marvel skins. It's like that's and that's back to not to fucking keep on praising what could be a pretty bad guy here, but that's straight up what Bobby Kotick said. It's like how the fuck do they can copy paste games that we made, which literally that's Blizzard and 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 like they work 800 hours a week and
I think it'll be telling. I think we will know 100% for sure when that Horizon clone comes out, because that's also live service, right? That's multiplayer elements.
yep.
It's not single player. If that absolutely dominates the market, then there's a big, 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 big worry. Because it is just them, they just scooping up things and then they just ever so slightly it's the kind of thing of like it's why like as much as it is scummy what Nintendo is doing to Power World, of course you'd be pissed if you're Nintendo. Like that's
Of course.
encroaching on your corner of something that you've dominated for decades.
Yeah.
And somebody's just come and been like, yeah, we'll do it like a little bit better than you in many aspects. And they're like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be telling when that comes out. If that sells better than Horizon, then Sony have a big worry on their hands.
Well, to me, it's like, people look at the Power World situation and get pissed off at Nintendo, which, and I can understand that. It does suck when corporations wield power like this, but it's, that's the thing is like, I don't understand how people can't look at two things and have the understanding of A, this sucks, but B, I understand why they're doing it. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, both are true, in my
Yep.
opinion, where it's like, yeah, it sucks that a corporation is able to, wield these trademark lawsuits but at the same time, Power World is, I mean, that is as close to infringement as you can possibly get. And I know that's not what they're suing for, but yeah.
Yep. Right. Getting to like the end, I guess now. Do they need to buy another studio? I guess is what will be up next. And if they do buy it, because obviously Xbox has gone out and fucking scooped up so many things, and that's you can see the fruit of their labor now finally. Because people, this is what people don't understand is when they were buying out the studios, and then they didn't have anything released the year after buying all them studios, or like the year after that. It's like
Yeah.
you need to wait for the ball to get rolling, and then I know people were like clowning on them, but like you see this year, and they've got like what 6, 7 titles dropping, bam, 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 bam. Like, all right.
It's insane.
Like that's
The
what happens when you take it seriously, you stockpile and you put your head down and you work. That's what happens.
Dude, I mean, not to, and we'll talk about this in the Xbox video, but good God, this year is nuts. I was actually last night, I was watching Sifted is a channel I frequently watch, and Shane Satterfield, one of the hosts for Game Face, was like running down what could potentially be on the horizon for Xbox this year. And I was like, whoa,
If anything, they
if
need to slow down. If I'm being 100%,
like no
they need to
shit.
spread it out because if you play your whole hand in one year, you're gonna be
Back to
you
2022.
yeah, this is the kind of thing of like, "Alright, don't throw everything out, Phil.
Well,
Wait."
and it's like the thing, dude, thinking about if this is all console exclusives, like, God, that is if all of this was console exclusive, I think you could make an argument that this would have been the best year for any console in the history of maybe not in the history, but in modern gaming history. Like, it would have been an insane lineup of exclusives. But go ahead, I'm sorry, I interrupted your question.
I'll finish the question 'cause it
Yep.
wasn't you cutting, I cut myself off, to be fair. So, obviously, do they need to buy another studio? If so, who would you want them to buy, and what, like, genre would you want them to target? Because you think of, like, if you're gonna be buying a studio that's shitloads of money, you'd want it to fill in the gap of a weakness.
Mm, yeah. So I'm pretty anti-acquisition because I like independent companies staying independent. I don't really like uh, I'm not a big fan of the conglomerate idea. I'm not a big fan of like the
No, we learned that with Embracer.
right.
We it was like, "Oh, this is a one chance," that we both were kinda open-minded about it and being like, "Okay, this if it's gonna work, this will work," and it was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, it does not work."
Right, and I mean, look at you look at Tango, you look at Sony London, you look at which Sony London may be a little bit different, but you look at like, you look at fucking what's the studio they just closed down? Not just Firewalk after the horrible Concord thing, but there was a Deviation, I think, is another studio
Mm.
that PlayStation bought and then closed down. Like, yeah, it's you don't and I look at what EA did for all those years, buying up studios, some of the most talented developers in gaming, and then just shuttering them. Like, so it's hard to root for acquisition, but purely from a business standpoint, we're talking a lot of business stuff here today with PlayStation. Like, they do have holes in their portfolio that they need to fill for sure. The Western role playing game, they have zero. They don't have a single Western role playing game under their belt, nor do they go out and get exclusive Western role playing games for their system. So yeah, you probably need to buy one of those studios, a Warhorse, a you look at BioWare in the worst state that they've ever been in right now. Um, I'm sure EA would be happy to find any excuse to get rid of that team. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you could buy BioWare for pennies on the dollar right now. EA might give them motherfuckers away right now. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
I
I
think
mean, you wouldn't be getting their
they would
library.
wait for Mass Effect because Mass Effect is the moneymaker of the 2 RPGs. Like, Dragon Age was always something that was beloved, but it didn't sell anywhere near that like Mass Effect sold.
Dragon Age actually sold better. Dragon Age Inquisition's BioWare's best-selling game ever. Just fucking crazy. It makes no sense.
Yeah, but
Mass
before
Effect
that, like, Origins and 2 didn't shift the numbers that, like, Mass Effect
1
2 and
and 2,
3
yeah,
did.
probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Inquisition was that outlier kind of thing. I don't wanna dog on it. It came out in a year where it is extremely weak, so it
There's
kinda
nothing to
gives it
play. Yeah.
exactly. So that's where I'm, like, thinking, like, yeah, I think that Mass Effect would still be a thing where they wouldn't be in talks to sell it just yet for
Mm.
BioWare. I think they wanna see if Mass Effect 5 comes out and bombs in the same way that Veilguard does, then, yeah, they'll be like, "Yeah, we need to get rid of this."
Yeah. Yeah, I was totally wrong about Veilguard, and I hope I'm not wrong about Mass Effect, man. I'm really, really rooting for that team. I'm rooting for that game, but I think not to be whatever, but if you look at Veilguard, that is a PlayStation ass game. That is a that has Sony first party written all over that thing. You know what I mean? The production value is off the charts in that game. That game looks incredible, plays really damn well. Yeah, you're definitely gonna have to figure something out with that fucking writing for sure. But man, oh man, it has PlayStation first party DNA in it. And wouldn't be a bad buy right now if you could possibly get that off of EA. So, I don't think Warhorse is in any they're in no rush to be sitting under any ownership right now. I think they're happy with their role. CDPR, same situation. I don't think they're in any rush to be owned by anybody right now. So those would kind of be what I would look at for the Western role playing market. I think BioWare is probably the only one that makes real sense. Maybe a Spiders, but I don't think Spiders is really going to deliver the AAA Western role playing experience. They've definitely, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe they just couldn't get funding with the situation they were currently in after launching Greedfall 1. Maybe they would actually benefit from having someone secure them $70 million for their next game and not have to go in the direction they went for Greedfall 2.
Man, I love Eurojank, but I don't like obviously punching down. I don't think they had. You could throw them 200 million.
They
It's
don't have
nothing.
it.
I love their games. Let me just make that
Yeah.
100% clear. Love their games, but I don't think they have the talent there that would utilize that money well. I think
Yeah.
they would end up doing something. Gonna take this opportunity to big up Avowed right now, but like with Obsidian wasting money in their early days because of their vision, they have a massive vision, they just couldn't execute it.
Right.
I think that would be if they ended up acquiring like a Spiders. I think that's what would end up happening. You could throw them 100 million, and then they would end up wasting 20 on something really, really dumb, and then that starts cascading into problems and stuff. Because I think that's also that's a big thing. I don't think it was a problem with them not receiving funding from Greedfall. Greedfall sold ridiculously well. I think that was their biggest success they've ever had. They had tons of money, and they were like, "Oh my god, what do we do with this?" And then it's just like, "I don't know." And then they just it's that thing of like self implosion of just you throw ideas out there, you start working on them. Oh no, I don't like that. And because you have that safety net of a big pile of money behind you, like with what Alpha Protocol had, where Sega threw them a ton of money because of their pedigree at the time, and then you waste it, and then you end up with a flawed product in the end. And that's the difference
Yeah.
between. This is why I want to give a tip to Avowed. Oh my god, Avowed is it's them with a tight leash. I think Microsoft has finally put on a collar on them and been like, look, guys, just if you have a first idea and you don't like it, you can move on to the second idea, but you're not moving on to that third idea. Like that is it. You have an A and a B. You don't have a plan C.
Mm. I can't wait to play that damn game, man. I'm
It's
really, really
so
excited.
good.
I'm so excited to jump in. Um, yeah, I think that kind of to your point, Kingdom Come and Warhorse kind of fits into that mold as well, where it's like, did you read that they only spent $40 million on Kingdom Come 2? That is
No, but that's incredible. Like that's good.
insane, man. And I think that's you got to get out of the United States for any acquisition you make. You're going to have to look. You need to look at a Remedy. Remedy is probably someone that is in desperate need of a buyer at this point. I would assume. I know that's unfortunate, but their games just don't turn profit.
It's only just
Alan,
begun. Alan Wake 2
yep,
has just started to earn the money, which is that's crazy because you've signed an exclusivity deal with Epic. So Epic kicked you tons of money and you still after putting it everywhere now, after a year, are only just now turning profit. That's tragic.
yeah. Well, what's even crazier is that their games don't cost a crazy amount of money. Control was, I think, developed for $30 million or something like that. They aren't an expensive studio at all. People just don't buy their games, which is crazy because they make some of the best games in the world. So maybe that PlayStation marketing could help that. You know what I mean? So yeah, nobody in the United States. I would not buy a single team in the United States, and uh, yeah, I think that unfortunately I love my country, but I boy oh boy, it just doesn't seem like games being made in the U.S. are the move right now. I would look at a Bloober, you know what I mean? Um, I would look at uh, I mean, Bloober makes a lot of sense because there's no survival horror games and they're stable outside of The Last of Us. And
Mm.
Bloober can create you a Resident Evil competitor easily. Asobo, once again, just getting outside of the US. Asobo's outside of the US, right? The Plague Tale people, I believe they're
Yeah, I believe so.
yeah, you know, Slow Clap, the
Okay.
Sifu guys. I am once again, I'm not 100% sure where some of these companies are, but I think Tripwire is under the Embracer umbrella. If you could buy them out, the people who made Maneater, weird kind of off the wall experimental shit. You need stuff like that. The B12 or B2 or whatever the team who made Stray, kind of you see this indie revolution kind of shifting into the AAA space with games like an Astrobot. You need more to you need more games you can get out quicker. Teams
Right.
like a Slow Clap can do that for you. Teams like an Asobo can do that for you. Teams like Ember Labs, Kena Bridge Spirit developer, could probably do that for you. And you have the animation expertise with Ember Labs. Could you look at them and be like, hey, maybe we can create games that look like this, that have this sort of this animation quality, but we make it this open world experience. And now we have a 40-hour game that was made for 40 million opposed to 400 million, just because of the artistic sort of penmanship opposed to the hyper realistic focus, you know.
Yeah. Um. I mean, I'll obviously that was a question thrown to you, but I'll throw back. I'll answer one studio I think would be a really good get for them. Like you said, no role playing, Western role playing games at all.
None.
Obsidian's gone. You can't get them. Bethesda's gone. Can't get them. There's no way you're getting CDPR. There's no way you're getting Larian, stuff like that. They're all way too comfortable.
Yep.
You need to go to that second tier. And with Spiders fumbling, I don't think they would be a good grab. Mm, I think the only team that would make sense is Alcat.
CRPG, yeah, you don't have
Take
any of
take
those
a
either.
take a stab at that with a CRPG because you've seen that once you Avowed is an incredible adaptation of Pillars into a proper a role playing game, a standard what you would consider a role playing game. I think if you were to actually take a stab at them, give them budget because they do have quality. Their writing is insane. Their day one launches are always buggy because they are always like suffocated with budget. They don't have enough. So they kind of have to kick it out there, rely on Kickstarters, rely on donations and stuff. Use so they're clearly easy to get on the cheap. They don't have any money. They're desperate. So I think grabbing them, throwing them money, that could be the person that gives you like, here's a CRPG every like 3 years, and here's a normal standard RPG every like 5 years. And I think that would do them really well. I don't think they'd be able to turn over games quicker than that.
Or hell, just give them all the budget in the world and tell them to go make their Baldur's Gate 3, make their magnum opus. You know what I mean? Make the most polished, refined version of what you already do.
I don't know if they would be able to pull that off because it took Larian. That was their third strike to get that. That's what I'm thinking of, kind of thing.
Right.
They haven't. Don't get me wrong. I love Pathfinder, Kingmaker, and Wrath of the Righteous. Wrath of the Righteous is a hell of a huge step up, but for like quality in comparison to like Baldur's Gate 3, it's leagues behind. It would
Okay.
require them probably about 2 more games to catch up to that with like a big budget and slowly snowballing.
That makes sense.
But I think they would be an incredible grab because of, like I said, with Avowed being such a good adaptation from the CRPG thing, they could make a good RPG.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, uh, if you can get if even if you can get 60% of a Baldur's Gate 3 out of them, it's probably worth it.
Right, two questions remain, but these
Perfect.
should be pretty quick. What is your most anticipated PlayStation title in development right now?
Probably Wolverine.
Okay.
Um, I think it's a weird thing where Wolverine, I feel like I know what to expect, so maybe it's not my most anticipated by that metric. I think a level of anticipation is curiosity. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that's a big element of anticipation is like the wonder of what it could be. And I think I got a good idea of what Wolverine's going to be. But the wonder of what Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet, like that, I'm very curious what the fuck that's going to be. Like I both good and bad. Like I have no idea. This could be a Souls game. I just don't know. You know what I mean? I have no idea. They could reveal this thing and that chick is just rolling around on the ground for hours, and I'm like, "Oh my god."
It's a
Or they could
Hellblade. Oh no.
they could reveal it and she's making dialogue options and like I have no idea what this
Yep.
game is going to be. So I think my curiosity is off the charts for that one. Now, I mean, if you want me to go full like down the pipeline of my absolute most anticipated game that I know for a fact is in development is
Mhm.
the X-Men game that's
Okay.
supposed to release in 2030 after Wolverine. But that's 2030. How hyped can I be for 20 fucking 30? You know what I mean?
5
It's
years, baby. Let's go. Yes,
so it's
no.
like if I could press a button and all those games were feature complete right now and I could play any of them, it'd be the X-Men game, of course. But um that's 5 years away. I can't even really look forward to that.
Alright, and I guess closing off, 'cause I won't lie, I don't have any anticipation for
Right.
any of
You're
that
not
stuff.
you don't own the
I'm sorry, people. Um, but the Wolverine game looks interesting, and I've actually when we talked about the on the profile review thing of, like, you talking about X-Men, I did end up watching that first movie.
Oh, no shit.
I'm moving through the actual first movie, like, to whatever the very,
Okay.
very first. So I'm
Okay,
working my
yeah.
way through it.
A little rough.
Um,
First one, a little rough.
I mean, to be fair, like, I don't know, it's held up much more better than I expected.
The
Like,
politics are good in it.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly the writing is incredible. Some of the line
Yeah.
deliveries of stuff is a little bit cheesy, and the animation is like,
Yeah.
"Alright, yeah, okay."
The
But
lightning and shit.
yeah, but I don't know, it's good. It's much better than I remember, so
Yep.
I would probably align with you on the X-Men game. I'm interested. I'm actually hyped to give X-Men Destiny a go
Dope, dude.
later
We
this
can
year.
talk about it. If you oh, hey, actually, if you record gameplay of it with your Elgato, we can throw it in a ranking whenever you play it and both rank it together.
You can see my terrible gameplay and my terrible decisions. Um, but yeah, just closing off then would be what year do you think the PS6 will launch? And then at what price do you think that they're gonna ask everybody to cough up? And I'm talking like
20
I'm talking about complete package of like not just diskless, like I'm talking like everything that you can get that you would buy. So you would buy the disk drive, you would buy the whole shebang.
Okay, well, that throws a wrench into let me hit you with this first. I
Mhm.
think you're gonna be able to get a model for $600. I think there will be a model available for, like, either 500 or $600. I think you've proven that the $700 thing isn't gonna work for a mass market. You know what I mean? But a PS5 Pro is never gonna work for a mass market. Um, I think you got to have that entry point of 500. I think 500, maybe 600 now if you launch in 2029, that'll be acceptable, and I think the year will be 2029. I think we see a PS6 in 2029. I don't think there's really ooh, well, if Xbox launches in 2027 or 2026 even, that's 3 years of being way underpowered potentially. Do they really wanna risk doing that? But at the same time, if the Xbox doesn't sell, then what does it really matter? Like, that's actually interesting. I don't know. I wonder if Xbox could corner the market for the most powerful hardware for, like, 2, 3 years without
Could that
PlayStation having an
Could that give them, like, an excuse to be like, they can't launch on PS5 and PS5 Pro
yeah.
because it's not strong enough to run the
Did you
content?
Yep, I said that about Gears of War E-Day. I don't know if we did that video together, but I said that I was like, "Go out there, or show off that Xbox Series Y or whatever the hell you're gonna
Yep.
call it, and just say, 'Hey, here's Gears E-Day running on it.' Unfortunately, you know, we'd love to launch it on PlayStation, but it's just not powerful enough."
Yeah.
Just throw out all of that
Just be
bullshit.
cheeky with it, yeah.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, for, like, max upgrades and everything, buying the disk drive here's the thing I will say. I think that the next console will launch with a disk drive. I think you'll be able to
Standard?
buy them. Yeah. I
Okay.
think you'll be able to buy a model with a disk drive in it. Um, There will be a SKU without a disk drive, obviously. There was one for the PS5 as well. But I think there will be an available option where you can buy the disk drive already baked into the console. I There's a lot of doom and gloom about physical media, and I definitely agree that we're in a rough spot, but it's still, I think they said it was like a $2 billion market, where people spend $2 billion a year on physical media. So it's like, that's not nothing. You know what I mean? That's $2 billion a year. So, or physical games in specific. So, anywho, max price you'll spend for everything out the door for the most beefy version, yada yada yada. Maybe seven or eight.
And are you happy with it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that would be buying like, you know, honestly, I might just say it's straight up 6. I think you might just have a pretty simple launch without a bunch of, optional shit, where it's just like, here's you can get the discless version for 500, you can get the disc version for 600. I'd be happy to pay 600 for a disc version, for sure. I understand that we're the minority and we have to pay to get the thing we want, sure, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that's rattled off all my questions. Unless you wanted
Alright,
to
man.
throw in anything that we missed out on that you would have wanted to be asked.
Let's see, I'll go through your questions real quick here. I think we pretty much hit everything. Um, yeah, man, I think, yeah, we hit absolutely everything on this list. So that's a wrap there on the PlayStation.
Well, I guess give a rating out of 10 then, as I guess would be a good closing point as to what you feel the PS5 is right now.
Oh my god. I mean, so it's the weird thing where it's like, if I look at the generation, if I'm ranking the generation, this isn't one of the worst generations of all time, for sure not. When you get games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Avowed and
Mhm.
but that's Indiana Jones. Like, when you're talking about overall generation, it's
Yep.
been a good, not great generation so far, I would say. But PlayStation specifically, what they have done this generation, I mean, they put a wrench in the workflow of all of their best teams almost. So like a 3 out of 10, I would say, something like that. I mean, it's
Damn.
horrendous.
Damn.
We would already have a Naughty Dog game, we would already have another Insomniac game, we would already have a Blue Point game, we would already have a Sony Ben game. That's all on PlayStation. So their generation, their mismanagement, I mean, it's the worst they've ever had. So I'd say a 3, maybe 4 max.
Yeah, and what everyone obviously needs to keep in mind, obviously, that it's how you feel about it personally. That's the idea.
Yeah, of
When you're
course.
giving that opinion, it's because it's how it's affected you. You're buying into the product, so yeah, try not to take that as objective. Like, it's obviously not for everybody a 3 out of 10. There's probably some people that like this is their first time jumping into a PlayStation. It's probably mind blowing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you've come from something so high and then arrived here, I can understand why that's such a big drop off.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, if you're not like a major Naughty Dog fan, or if you're not like a major uh, if you're not a major fan of the first party games, then it's probably been like a 7 out of 10 generation for you overall, and that's totally fine. I just love their first party shit. Love it
Mhm.
and I miss it. So it's a 3.
Alright,
Shit,
well,
yeah,
that
man.
is that.
Appreciate you lining those questions up. That was really damn fun. And now we're gonna swap, and I'm going to be on the question asking side as we talk some Xbox. So that video should be coming out probably a few days after this one. So stay tuned. We appreciate you, and we shall see you very soon. Goodbye.
See you later.